Joanna, good to see you. Thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I want to kick off with something that you said to me when we spoke a week or two back. You said that you were particularly frustrated because customers pay the price because lawyers are resistant to change. And I can understand why that would be frustrating, actually. But tell us why that's important to you and why does it matter to what you in terms of what you're trying to do?
Well, I think, Paul, that this is the core of our business, really. I am myself a barrister and I'm specialized in war crimes. And when I moved to Ireland, the tables turned and I became a customer. I needed a solicitor.
Okay.
Overnight, I realized that it was extremely hard to find a solicitor, to know when's your next available appointment, to see price transparency, to make the difference between those that are specialists and those who are generalists. And all of this is because essentially lawyers are still selling themselves the same way that they were selling themselves 50 years ago. And as we went into LegalMoov, into facilitating, if you will, the connection process between solicitors and individuals, we realized that solicitors are extremely resistant to change. They don't want to modernize.
So let me ask you about that. So just tell me, I mean, because I wasn't around. Well, I was around actually 50 years ago, but tell me how you think they were selling themselves 50 years ago and how are you going to do it differently? I mean, just talk us through the, if you like, the problem and the solution.
Absolutely. So our market research has shown us that essentially in Ireland and for much of the UK, when people need solicitors, what they do is they call their mother or they call a friend who has a friend who's a solicitor, and then they ask for referrals simply because when you're in a conflict situation with your partner, with your husband, in whatever conflict situation, you want to trust that you're going to get the
Yeah.
right person to help you through this. The stakes are very often high, you're stressed out, so you want that trust element. And so people use referrals. But the obvious problem is that if you were living in Cork or you were like from Waterford, like yourself, and then you move to a city, you don't have a family solicitor there. Or if you're like myself, moving from somewhere else and you find yourself in need of a solicitor, you don't have the network to be able to find people. And unfortunately, this is still the way it happens today.
So how are you going to change that then? I mean, that's obviously that's the problem that you're frustrated about. Tell us how you're going to fix it.
Well, essentially, we've built an AI sales pipeline for legal professionals. And what that means is we help individuals with legal issues or small businesses with legal issues from day one to understand first what is the legal issue they have. We deliver accurate legal information so they can understand where the law is. Is there even a legal issue that they need to pursue or they should pursue? And then the second step, if they do, then we connect them to qualified and trusted legal professionals
Right.
for them to follow and pursue any course of legal action they need to take.
Okay. And presumably, I mean, you can access this from anywhere. I mean, you don't have to be in you don't have to be in Waterford or in Sligo or in Dublin I mean, you can access this from anywhere, presumably, which means you can access legal services from anywhere. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And it's very much needed also these days because one of the big problems we're having is that the big American law firms are moving into Dublin. And essentially because they are more efficient and they have a better presence online, they're taking over work that rural solicitors would before have been taking. You
Okay.
know, and there's less of this geographical barrier. You can have consultations online now if it's just a matter of receiving advice and needing legal guidance. You could speak to a solicitor anywhere in Ireland. It doesn't need to be somebody in your locality.
Yeah. And you talked about, I mean, the kind of American law firms moving into Ireland. I mean, there are issues though around jurisdiction and I mean, obviously the law is different in Ireland compared to the US. I mean, how is that impacted by something like this?
Right. Well, we very much saw this movement 10 years ago already in London.
Right.
What happens is you have big solicitor firms that set up and essentially they recruit and employ domestic solicitors to work as
Oh,
part
I
of the
see.
bigger umbrella. What you have to understand is a law firm is not a company. What it is, if you will, a partnership
Yeah.
of different solicitors, and they remain independent. And the only thing they share is they share the regulatory obligations. So therefore, they get together so they can meet the obligations to the bar or to the Solicitors Association, and then they share a certain fee, a fee structure. So they pay a certain tax, if you want. We call it rent, to the law firm. So with this model, it's easier for American firms to just move in and expand. And with keeping in mind that they come in with the expertise and with the clients very often as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm correct in thinking that a while back you had to be a lawyer to own a law firm. I mean, I don't think that's the case anymore, is it?
Well, it depends. It depends on the country, but technically, as long as you can meet the obligations, and what they would do is they would
Mm.
employ a COO, right? A chief operating officer who is qualified in the relevant jurisdiction and aware of the obligations that need to be met. So it's not a barrier to entry.
Yeah, okay. So I can see what you're trying to do. You're trying to, if you like, protect domestic solicitors, lawyers in Ireland. I get that against global competition, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. What does success like look to you? I mean, you're relatively early in the journey. I mean, what does success like? Where do you want to get to in the next, say, the next 5 or 6 years?
Right. I think to answer this question, we need to start by the explaining a little bit the new landscape, if you will,
Okay.
because the real disruptor is not us. The real disruptor is general purpose AI that has arrived on the scene now,
Okay.
and essentially everyone who has questions about anything, what recipe you're going to make tonight for dinner, or how to fix your legal issue, everybody ends up on general purpose AI. The issue being that, unfortunately, on general purpose AI, you do not get accurate legal information. And we've had several cases in the UK and in Australia of solicitors being disbarred for relying on case law and on legal
Okay.
principle suggested by general purpose AI. And there's a big potential there for misinformation. And unfortunately, you don't find out until it's too late and you're in court, right? So that's really what has been changing the landscape for solicitors.
Okay.
And for us coming in as a business, we're coming in with a different proposition that we are focused on accurate legal information. So we're essentially an educational service because you have to keep in mind that rules are critical for everything you do, for living your life, for having kids, for doing business, for having a job. It's like if I tell you, Paul, play a board game with me, right? But I won't tell you what the rules are. How could you even play the game or even aspire to win? It's
Mm.
not possible. And it's the same idea that if you don't understand the law accurately, you don't know your rights, you don't know what your options
So,
are.
so what you're saying is LegalMoov has got its own, if you like, database that is properly equipped rather than a general LLM. Yeah.
Yes, actually, we've built a system that is made of three parts. So we have a data set that is composed of the laws and the case law of, for now, Ireland, because we've just started in Ireland. And this is updated every day. So every day you have the latest up-to-date
Right.
legislation
Okay.
for. We have a RAG application system to be able to process this data. Just because it's public doesn't mean it can be understandable by a large
Mhm.
language
Mhm.
model. And then we had to also train a language model so that it can deliver law accurately. Because, for instance, if I tell you a term like heavy goods vehicle, it means something. Everybody has a sense of what it means, but legally, it's a
Mm.
predefined term. And so, in order to simplify without losing meaning, we've had to train our LLM to do that. So we have these three parts, and together they enable us to deliver accurate legal information.
Yeah. I mean, and that's actually really important. I mean, I had an interesting, well, not that interesting, but I had an experience the other day when I was trying to find out about a bank holiday. And the AI doesn't recognize bank holidays. They're called public holidays. And I kept saying, well, when's the bank holiday? And they're saying, well, I don't know. Because it's that point about accuracy, isn't it? I mean, if it's not based on accurate data, you're gonna have problems. So I can absolutely see the point of that. Let me ask you about being a CEO. I mean, how do you feel about that job?
I think. Nothing really quite prepares you for being a CEO.
Mm.
I came into this as a trained barrister. I think I probably had the advantage of having worked in war crimes before. So I worked in conflict situations where everything is a little bit up in the air. There's a lot of uncertainty. Things move very fast. So that helped, I think, significantly for me to kind of get up to speed and understanding what being a CEO really means. But being a CEO, especially in the very early days where we are, means that you have to be on the ball and be able to do everything,
Mm.
everything from A to Z. And if you don't, and of course you don't know what to do sometimes, there are things you don't know, you have to learn and you have to figure it out.
Mm.
And most importantly, it's not just you. You have to carry your team with you,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So it's I think if I can summarize it for me, the most important part of the learning curve was learning to have the strength of conviction in myself, in my decisions.
Yeah.
Because if I'm there hesitating, then I'm not going to convince anyone that this is the right course of action,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that strikes me about your situation is as your original quote was about, customers are paying the price for lawyers resisting change. I mean, you're also kind of going up against the status quo, aren't you? Which, I mean, requires a bit of resilience. I mean, how do you feel about, if you like, challenging the way everything is done? Because that's really what you're doing, isn't it? How does that feel at the moment?
Well, I think it very often feels like you're alone,
Yeah.
right? You're alone in the vision. And it's how good you are at explaining what is the outcome of your product, what is the outcome of whatever it is you're putting on the table, and how this changes lives. I think that's where you get them. But before that, you're very much alone. And especially, we've decided to open a tech company in rural Ireland. I mean, who does that, right?
Well, I was going to ask about that. I mean, how did you do that? I mean, it must be really difficult, for example, to recruit, the kind of tech talent that you need in the middle of rural Ireland. I mean, it's a very nice place, but it's not got necessarily lots of tech people floating around wondering, looking for jobs, is it? I mean, how did you manage that bit of the equation?
Well, first the decision came very naturally because I've settled with my family in rural Ireland. So the first question was, do we move? Do we,
Yeah.
either the Dublin would have been the first option that we would have considered. But thinking about it, and especially now with hindsight that I know how it works, it was a very good decision for us to make.
And why
Um,
was it a good decision? You said it's a good decision. Why? I
it
mean,
was
just explain
absolutely,
that.
it was a very good decision because when you think about it, in Dublin, what you have is you have the very big tech companies, and
Yeah.
then you have a multiplicity of small businesses all competing for attention, for resources,
Mm.
for space, really, right? So yes, there are more people there to be recruited, but at the same time, as a startup, you're competing for opportunities. That's what it is. And it's extremely hard to compete for opportunities when there's more people. Whereas in rural Ireland, what I found three things. First, because there's no tech company or very few tech companies, whenever we approached the local authorities, especially the local enterprise office, we were welcomed. We were
Right.
beyond
Okay.
welcomed.
That's really
Um,
positive. Yeah.
the support has been incredible. There's always somebody I can call because obviously you have to bear in mind as well, I don't have necessarily the network that I need to be
Mm.
able to start. And so everybody's been very, very supportive. I think secondly, the other aspect that's been important is because whenever I need something to be done or I need to meet someone, because rural Ireland is so sparsely populated, you always meet people. They will
Mm.
come out to see you. They're generous with their time. I think they're curious, right?
Yeah.
First of all, they're
I'd be
curious.
curious. Yeah.
And it's fine. It doesn't matter. They open their doors. They're there to talk to you. And that makes a big difference because when I pick up my phone, I know who they are. And so the conversation is on a different level. And I think that the third step is the recruitment. Yes, the recruitment has been hard, but we're a tech company, right? We're online. Some of our people are local, some of our people are in Dublin, some of our people are actually one of my co-founders, two of my co-founders are based in Germany, one in Hamburg, one in Berlin. And
Mm.
so we're online anyway. I see them twice a year, but I talk to them every day.
Mm.
So I think the business model strangely lends itself very well to operating in rural areas as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think I mean, I think it also helps that the Irish community are pretty friendly. I mean, I lived in London for a while, and it's not nearly as friendly as Ireland. That was my experience. But that's a bit of an aside. Let me ask you also about being, if you like, a lawyer running a tech firm. I mean, how does that impact on you? I mean, do you enjoy, as it were, not being the techie?
Well, before you can enjoy it, you have to understand it, right? And I think that was the first challenge. The
Right.
first challenge is we speak different languages, right, with our tech people. And
Yeah.
it took me a while to find the right tech people to work with. I remember at some point we had a developer, and every time I'd ask him a question, I would end up with more questions after his answer,
All
you
right.
know? And it just didn't work because, it's not because he was not a good developer, it's because there's a huge gap in the way that we express ourselves. Technical complex contexts, I mean, it's complex, but it's not rocket science by any means, right? I mean, you understand, once you understand the basics of it, you get it. You get how it works, and it's just about applied problem solving. It was really just the language approach and how to express ourselves. And technical people and developers tend to be very inwards and introverts, and they like their work. They like challenges. They like to be by themselves. Anyway, those on my team. So it was overcoming that first challenge. And then in terms of being a lawyer in the tech field, it's surprisingly refreshing. I will say that because when you operate as a lawyer, certainly a lot of the issues you face are predefined, right? You know what the procedure is. You
Mm.
need to, I mean, you can anticipate there are a certain amount of strategy you can work around and you can to determine the outcome or change the outcome, but the path is laid out in front of you. Whereas when you're in tech, there is so much more space for being creative. There's so much more space
Right.
for innovation. And I enjoy that very much.
Mm. Mm.
It's
Yeah,
not for
no.
everyone, I will tell you. It's not for, and there are days you'll meet me, I'll tell you, I'm not enjoying it at all, right? But that's part of the process, no? The challenge of it and rising to find a way out.
Yeah, no, and your point about, if you like, engineering being fundamentally a creative process. I mean, my father was an engineer, and I certainly recognise that. And it's great to see people's kind of creative instincts flourishing in those environments, isn't it? Let me ask you about the journey that you've been on. I mean, have you come up against any particular surprises where you thought, oh, that didn't turn out quite the way I thought it might?
Yes, of course, many, Paul. More that I can actually than we have the time to discuss. But I would say if there was a surprise that I would say is when we first set out to build, we set out to build for small firms, small
Right.
and medium firms. And what we found out is that going back to the point of they don't know what's good for them, right? In a way. And what we found is that the profession is so entrenched and I'd say so buried in convention. They like to do things the
Mm.
way they like to do it, that they're resistant to change. And that has been probably the biggest challenge because I would very often be talking to, for instance, somebody who has a small law firm with two people, they're brothers, it's a solicitor's firm that their father started. They have zero marketing and they don't plan on doing any marketing
Mm.
and they don't have any capacity to expand. Now, that's great for their business today, but how is that going to be for their business
Yeah.
in 2 years, in 3 years, in 5 years? It's simply not sustainable in the world where
And
we're
do
going.
they recognize that that's the case, or are you sort of lecturing them saying this is not sustainable, and they think, oh, well, maybe. I mean, how is that process playing out?
Well, it's very hard to lecture a solicitor. I don't know if you've tried. It's very hard to lecture a solicitor or to sell to them, in fact. I think what really does work is explaining um, how the world is changing. And I think it's a lot of fear. I think it's
Mm,
fear-based.
mm,
And every time you go to the Law Society event, that if they're all the events that they have, that's what you hear. You hear a genuine fear of being replaced by AI.
mm,
But in fact, the truth is, it's not AI who's going to replace lawyers. It's lawyers using AI are going to replace those who are not using AI.
mm,
And that is not just for AI that is facilitating internal legal workflow. That's also AI that is facilitating the sales process because sales now is online. Everybody is online. People want transparency. They
mm,
want to know how much 1 hour with a solicitor is going to cost them. I mean, it's fair, isn't it?
mm,
And it's also important to note that solicitors have the legal obligation to be transparent about their fees, and yet they all make you call their secretaries to figure it out.
mm.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing that you're tackling there because it's not just about the service, is it? It's not just about the legal part. It's about the mechanics of how those people are running businesses or not running them very well, perhaps.
yeah.
You know.
I don't know if you remember, Paul. I certainly do. 5 years ago, when you had to get to buy car insurance, you had to call five different companies to figure out which one is offering which terms
Mm.
and which one was the cheapest. This is what people are still going through today to find a solicitor. When I had to find a solicitor, it took me 7 emails over over 5 phone calls, and it took me 4 days to get an
Yeah,
appointment
yeah,
next week. You know.
yeah. It's poor, very poor customer service, isn't it, from that point of view?
Because they're overwhelmed. It's not that they don't want new clients. When you speak to them, they all do want new clients,
Mm,
but they don't have a system to go about it because they're still waiting for the referrals like back in the day.
mm. And how would you say your personal values have shaped the way the business is evolving?
Very much so. I think that because we're a startup, but we need to evolve and we need to make decisions
Mm,
because our flexibility is really what distinguishes us from the big unicorn companies that are operating in the same field as us. But at the same time, because we're a startup, we don't have the amount of funding to afford
mm,
high level, high quality, experienced people. So our way to go around it is to have my co-founders and myself are very experienced. But we're working for equity at first, initially, in
mm,
like most business would, right? And so the only way to make this work is to treat people in accordance with their experience. And for instance, one of my co-founders, Ulf, has much more experience than me. He's been in the business of tech for over 25 years. And even though I am, as a shareholder, I have more shares than him, I always listen to him.
mm,
And and I religiously listen to him. Doesn't mean I don't disagree, but I will sleep over it if I need to make sure that I do my best to follow his experience and guidance because he knows what he's talking about. So, and that is very much, I think, a personal touch, that it's not about necessarily who has more shares, who has the
mm.
better job title, even though I'm a CEO and he's a CMO. It's about being having the space to listen to the experience and having the ear for it.
Yeah, and let me just pick up that point. I mean, how have your sort of skills and background as a barrister influenced the way you lead the business? I mean, what's behind my question? I mean, was partially taught to sell by a barrister. And they were very good at saying, one of the things they said to me was, it's really important to understand the other person's argument, the reason why they wouldn't want to buy whatever it was we were trying to sell them. Before you work out how you're going to sell it, is to understand their situation. And that's always sort of stuck with me. Have your barrister's skills come into play in terms of negotiating with people and those kind of things?
Absolutely. For a long time, I was running war crimes investigations. So
Right.
what this means is I would very often walk into a room with somebody who I've never met before, who doesn't speak the same language as me, who would be a victim, who suffered something
Mm,
unimaginable. And we have 3 hours in the room with a translator. And within these 3 hours, I'm going to have to make them tell me things that they've never said, that they don't want to say, and they certainly don't want to say to a stranger, right? And they're very often security concerns and all of that. And it's part of the skills, though the skill set that we've had to develop
Mm.
to lead interviews in that way and build trust in very, very short spans of time and in drastic circumstances. And I think that this capacity to build rapport, right?
Mm.
Beyond the convincing, right? It's building the rapport. It's you look into my eyes, I'm right here with you, right? And I'm going to listen before I'm going to tell you, okay, this is what I want, and can we find a common agenda here? Is there something we can do together? First is the building the rapport, and that's definitely something I've learned on the job.
Yeah. And let me ask you about another, and one of the other features of building a business in the current environment is the level of uncertainty. I mean, you've already talked about how AI well, it is in the process of changing things. I mean, what's your take on dealing with that kind of never-ending uncertainty? I mean, my feeling is it's accelerating, actually. The level of uncertainty is kind of getting worse, actually. What's your take on that, given what you're doing?
Right. I think when thinking about that, you need to understand that the human mind is not really good at thinking in exponential terms,
Mm.
right? And that's a big problem because we have reached now a level of advancement that is exponential. So when you think the capacity of AI doubles every 70 days, that's 70
Yeah,
days, it
it's
doubles. And
extraordinary,
so
isn't it?
absolutely unimaginable. And so I think there are two things that you need to think about very well when going into business in a time like this. The first thing is whether your business model itself is future proof. Because if you don't future proof, you're going to be out of business in 3 months. So understanding the trajectory of this exponential growth
So
and
that's a really interesting point. Let me just ask you about that. So how have you tried to future-proof legal move? Because it's easy to say, it's a bit more
absolutely.
difficult to do, isn't it? I mean, how have you tried to do that?
Right, absolutely. And I think when we first started, we were very naive about it. We were focused on a product, as very often founders are,
Mhm.
and we wanted to develop a good product. And we thought, we've got a good product, so sure, why won't we sell, And we've had to go back to the drawing board and have this conversation and have this thinking process. And we understood that the trajectory of developing for accurate law is going for law firms. There are law firms, there are big law legal companies. There's Ligora, there's Clio, there's Harvey. Harvey raised 350 million last year.
Wow.
They are developing accurate law, but for lawyers' use only, for professional use only. This means that you and me and normal people are still going to have to pay lawyers
Yeah.
who are, their work is getting easier, but we still have to pay them, right? So they're gatekeeping the technology,
Yeah.
which is fine. But we understood that this is where it was going. So it's not that what we're doing is not happening, it's happening, but for professionals first. And so we understood that we had that space, but that's not enough of a space. And in order to make it, I would say, safer from a business point of view, we added the marketplace component. So
Mm.
as a marketplace, what we have is we sell to solicitors and legal professionals, and they are on our platform. And we understand that an AI or an AI model is not going to be able to go and sell to small and medium law firms the way we do. And so this gives us the space for the next 2, 3 years when lawyers are still going to be needed
Mm.
to be able to build. And I think the second level beyond future-proofing your product itself is understanding the market in which you're going in. And that's not just in relation to AI, that's also in relation to the current circumstances we're living in, right? Where fuel prices, wars, different conflicts are arising, and that's changing the market, of course. And so I think it's important to understand what is the market that you're getting into. And a very wise man told me that if you're going to sell your product in spite of the crisis, then you're in for a hard time because your life just got 10 times harder in the last two
Mm.
weeks.
Yeah.
But if you're selling because of the crisis, you're in business.
Mm.
Because it's not just because there are financial situations or an economic crisis that it becomes harder. It's still possible. There are some markets that are growing. And for us at LegalMoov, what that means is, for instance, there's some legal fields that will grow. For instance, insolvency is going to grow.
Mm.
Family law is not going away. Inheritance is not going away. We're going to see a shift from tort, which means claims on people against people, to more potentially mass claims, right? So against companies. So these are the trends that we can foresee, and these are the trends that we can adjust for. But it takes this conscious calculation
Mm.
of, in all of the uncertainty, there are still things that you can foresee and you plan
Mm.
accordingly.
It's about, I mean, I guess the entrepreneurial mindset is about looking for and identifying those opportunities, isn't it? Amid the doom and gloom, if you like. Let me ask you about, I mean, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and most of them say to me that building a business is like riding a roller coaster. Good days, bad days. And I get the feeling that that's probably been your experience. What is it about this that, because you could, you're a barrister, you could go and work for the UN or whatever. I mean, what is it about this that kind of gets you to bounce out of bed every morning and kind of ride the roller coaster? I mean, what is it about this that is motivates you?
Um, I think it's two things. The first thing for me is that I really believe in this. I really believe in the mission that
Right.
we're achieving. And that sounds awfully naive, right? But and probably a little bit idealistic. But I was there. I grew up in a very poor family. So I understand what it's like to not have somebody to call to figure out what your rights are. So we're descendant of slaves, so I'm the third generation born free. So we grew up in a place where in my own family, I'm the first between my parents. My father didn't finish primary school, and my mom didn't finish secondary school. So I went on, I did university 8 years, I qualified, I have two bachelors, I don't even quite think my parents probably understand quite well what it is that I do. But I feel this very personally, that it's important for people to understand their rights and the rules.
Mm.
Um, and I think the second thing that keeps me up and keeps me going is that um, I love to be my own boss.
Yeah, I'm like that.
I love to
Mm.
push the boundaries, right? It's not so much I love to be my own boss. I love to push the boundaries. And it's very rare that I find leaders who push the boundaries as much as I do. So the choice is either I'm under somebody who's going to take small leaps and it's not going to be enough to satisfy my curiosity or my drive,
Mhm.
or I do it myself. I think it's a very simple choice for me at this stage.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I think it gets addictive as well. I mean, I couldn't go back to working for somebody else. I mean, I was never good working for somebody else anyway, but I definitely couldn't go back to it now. I mean, it's just a way of life, really. Um, Let me ask you about your team though, because you've obviously got bags of resilience, and you're super motivated, and you've got the vision thing, and it's also riding that roller coaster is tough for the team. Because there's not huge numbers of you. I mean, I don't know how many you employ exactly, but it's not vast numbers, I suspect. That's difficult for them. How do build the resilience into the if you not protect, but to enable the people that work with you to perform, given that there are lots of ups and downs and setbacks. And I mean, how do you build resilience into the business? I mean, what's your take on that?
I think that there's a certain level of resilience that you can't build, that you need to recruit,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So it's about attitude. And I think a good attitude goes a long, long way, much further than
Mm.
qualifications and
Yeah.
experience. And I've seen that in my work. You'll always find that people who have more experience just can't be bothered sometimes, to try new things out. So it's recruiting the people with the right attitude. And then the second aspect of it is shielding them. You have to protect them to a certain extent, right? Protect them from the uncertainty specifically. And I think uncertainty is what really undermines maybe younger people who don't have the same amount of confidence, or um, so they're trying to do their work, but there are too many questions. So if you open the gates too early and you put all the questions, if I put all the questions that are on my desk on the desk of my developers, they freeze. That's
Mm.
what happens. So it's about really having a clear division of labor and not transferring that uncertainty, protecting them from the uncertainty. So keeping the targets achievable and within reach, and then having a plan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I can see your point there. In terms of your business, what would you say are the things that have made it successful? I mean, I know you're not quite where you want to be yet, but I mean, you've come quite a long way. What would you say are the factors that have made your business successful so far?
Yeah, I think we're very early days, but to actually build on your point, I never thought I'd make it this far. So it's still very
So,
much
sorry, that's a really interesting. Why did you not think you'd get this far?
because I've had businesses before. This is my third business, but I
Right.
never built something that was on that scale, that is potentially a global product. I never built something that was in tech. So,
Right.
which is a very different field. So it requires this interdisciplinary bridge and capacity to bridge. And I never built something that had no safety net like this. So I was building businesses where I was having a salary on the side, or I kept, or I was self-sufficient. So there was, I think, less at stake. And all of this together raised the stakes, right? Made it more fun, but also made it more nerve-wracking. And I think that um, doing this, getting back to your question, what made us successful, I think, is the team. We've My co-founders and I, we're very close.
Mm.
We discuss things, and I think it helps as well that they're German, because I don't know if Germans are very direct. There is nothing that they cannot say.
Yeah.
And I love that. I find it much harder, and I think it might be an Irish thing as well, that they find it harder to speak about the hard bits, to say it out loud.
Mm.
And so if you don't know what it is, it's much harder to fix. If you can't
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about it, how
I
do
mean,
you fix it?
that's true of the English. I mean, they say English is the language of diplomacy. It's because it can be made to mean anything, and that is difficult to deal with if you don't really understand what people are trying to get at. So it's a very interesting point that, um, it just adds further complication, doesn't it? If you can't, and delays you getting to the bottom of the problem, really.
And I think I would like to add something as well. And I think it's about trust. It's
Yeah.
about knowing that if I said something, and my commitment was that they will be consulted on every single major decision that changes the product drastically or the business drastically, and I keep to it.
Mm.
Because once your trust is gone, that's it. That's my team. I've got nothing else other than them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. 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 Let me ask you about something that you mentioned a second ago. You talked about enjoying. I mean, what is it that you enjoy the most about being the CEO?
um, it's very interesting. But when I get a good news about something, I'm happy for like 5 minutes, and then I share with my team, and then I'm already planning the next step.
Right.
And I love this moment when I just won and I'm looking at something bigger than what I just won, right? Because, and you told me that you're into mountain climbing, so you might understand this feeling that suddenly that thing you're looking at would have been way too big for you, and you
Mm.
you didn't think you'd have a chance of getting there. But because of this win that you just got, you suddenly feel like you can do
Yeah,
it.
there's always another mountain, as it were.
And that's what I love. That's what I love about it. It's just this little moment. It doesn't last very long, right? Because the next moment I'm there, I'm actually planning, and you
Mm.
lose track of it. But it's this sudden feeling that you know you can do it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's a
And
good feeling that. I always think it's a
it's
good
an
feeling.
amazing feeling.
Yeah.
It's an not just an amazing feeling, it changes you. It changed me in my private life.
In what way? I mean, in what way has that changed you? That's a very interesting point.
Because I now want and can aspire to things that I never thought I would even like.
Right.
That was so beyond me that I couldn't even imagine,
Mm.
whether I would enjoy it or not.
Mm. I mean, entrepreneurship does change people. I mean, it's an interesting, yours is a really good example of that. I mean, you're not the first one I've heard to say that. The experience of doing it changes you, and often in really good ways. Let me ask you about the flip side. I mean, I'm always interested in the mistakes people make. I mean, what would you say has been the biggest mistake, and what did you learn from it?
My biggest mistake was wanting to go too fast.
Why was that a mistake? Because, I mean, that's about pushing, isn't it? Keeping pushing.
I know, but you cut if you when you cut corners, your technical debt builds.
Okay.
There you make mistakes. It's waiting for the right timing. I don't want to say too fast, it's timing.
Mm,
Timing is real, right? Just like momentum is real, timing is real. And sometimes it's about waiting for the right moment,
mm,
right? And my inexperience and maybe being in a new field, I didn't have a good capacity to judge that very early on in the days. I just thought push, push faster, better. But now I realize not always.
mm. I guess it's like having a baby, isn't it? I mean, it just takes 9 months. It just does.
Yeah, and what they tell you is it's true. They say, I remember when I was pregnant, I have an 8-year-old, and I was like that. I was huge and going to the hospital for checkups. And I was like, when is this happening? And they keep telling you the baby comes when you're ready.
Yeah.
And it's the most annoying thing that you could hear, right? But it's true. Unfortunately, I'm on the other side now. I can say it's true.
Yeah. And if you were to go back to day one, is there anything you'd do differently knowing what you know now,
Hmm.
beyond the being more patient?
I think I would be harder and tougher on my finances, on my financial planning.
And why do you say that? I mean, why is that?
Because very early on, one of the most daunting thing you can do as a startup CEO is to do financial projections for 5 years for a business that you have no finances for the first year, right? You
Yeah.
know that. I can see you
Yeah.
smile, right?
Yeah.
So this is so daunting and challenging. And yet, once you get into your assumptions, your financial market entry projections, and once you see it, it defines your strategy
Mm,
and it defines your fight. It's like the numbers are clear, they don't lie. So it forces you to go back and adjust accordingly and plan accordingly. And it's the clearest and most instinctive way of doing it. And I think I would have been closer to my numbers from the very beginning.
mm.
I am now, but I've learned it the hard way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, business is all about numbers, isn't it? So if you don't understand the numbers, you're going to create problems for yourself. Let me ask you a similar question that's slightly different. If you were to give some advice to a rookie CEO, what would that advice be?
Trust your vision. When you see that there is a space,
Mm.
you might be the only one who sees that space.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is the combination of being isolated and having a vision very often puts you in a very weak place. It's self-doubt. You go straight
Mm.
into
Mm.
self-doubt because the vision is very big, but yet you're alone. It feels almost crazy sometimes, right? And it's this, how do you cross from self-doubt into trusting yourself, the conviction?
So your
That's
advice would be to trust yourself. That's that what you're saying for the
yeah.
rookie.
Absolutely. Trust yourself. And you know what? And if it's a mistake, you'll fail, you'll learn something. And
Yeah.
the next time you will know when to trust yourself.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't trust yourself, you can't do it. In that moment of a company always starts with one person, one idea in one person's head.
Mm.
And you know what? How many businesses actually just died in somebody's dream notebook?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I like entrepreneurs is that they're very good at figuring out when they've made a mistake and fixing it. And they're pretty open about that. I mean, sometimes, if you talk to politicians, I mean, they never admit they've made a mistake. Whereas entrepreneurs are like, yeah, I got that wrong and I'm going to fix it by doing this. And they're onto it. And I think that's a really lovely thing about entrepreneurship. It's very positive in that. And that's really about how you learn. which I think is great, really. One last question before we wind up. What do you want your legacy to be?
Um, I would love to change legal access
Well, you
forever.
are changing legal access, aren't you?
Yeah, I know, but properly, globally. Think about it. The Commonwealth has 1.3 billion people, right? One third of the world population have the same legal system, which is based on common law, right? So these are countries I can absolutely support and help. The system that's already built, we just need to scale it and sell it.
Yeah.
And so imagine that, ensuring that one third of the world's population actually knows the rules. If
Yeah.
I do that, I would,
Yeah.
I would feel very proud of myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I love to see a bit of ambition. I mean, I think you've bitten off a decent sized chunk of work there. So good luck with that. And thank you for Joanna, thank you for coming on and sharing the story. I mean, it's a great proposition. I mean, legal stuff is never going to go away, and making it easier for people to understand what they should and shouldn't be doing seems to me to be a pretty good proposition. So thanks for coming and sharing the story with us, and good luck going forward.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, Joanna. Bye bye.